Hello everyone, I am Lenin, Assistant Professor of English, St.Joseph College, Cuddalore. Through this video content, we are going to learn the Romantic period in history of English literature. Romantic period is one of the essential periods which paved way for the beginning of new literary movement as far as English literature is concerned. Romantic poets can be classified into two categories: first generation poets and second generation poets. These poets were not known as romantic poets in their own day. Rather, Robert Southey termed them as the lake poets because most of the romantic poets had link with the Lake District in northwestern England. The poetry of Shelley and Byron was called the Satanic School of Poetry because their unconventional lifestyles and irreverent ideas. Another important romantic poet, Keats's lower class status, led to the snobbish label called Cockney School being applied to his work. The term romantic as a means of labeling a literary school began to be applied from the second half of the 19th century. Use of the word romantic to designate a literary school. Thomas Shaw, in his Outlines of English Literature, under the title History of English Literature, published in 1846, again in 1849, entitled The Dawn of Romantic Poetry. And he says, I quote, "The great revolution in popular taste and sentiment which substituted what is called romantic type literature for the cold and clear-cut artificial spirit of classicism which is exhibited in its highest form in the writings of Pope." The words of Thomas Shaw goes like this: forms of expressions in a wider, more passionate and more natural sphere of emotion. This is what he termed that romantic school of poetry. First generation romantic poets, or they may be called the senior romantics. It all started with William Blake. Because of William Blake, the romantic movement started in England with the publication of poetical sketches in 1783 and 1789, one of the masterpieces of his work, Songs of Innocence. In 1794, Songs of Experience. These two books claim to be the remarkable works of William Blake's, which witnessed the beginning of romantic poetry. Other important work of him includes Song of Laws, Book of Laws, Book of Ahania, The Four Zovas, Milton, and Jerusalem. This is how William Blake portrayed Newton in the year 1795. Most of the romantics were very good art also. And then the saga of the romantics, the prime and foremost acclaimed romantic poet of the romantic school of poetry, William Wordsworth. His principal work includes Lyrical Ballads, Preface to Lyrical Ballads, which is a collaborative work with Coleridge in the year 1798. In 1805, he had published Prelude. 1807, Ode to the Intimations of Immortality and Resolution of Independence, and also the world famous Solitary Reaper. In the year 1814, he had produced Excursion. Another important poet of this movement, Samuel Taylor Coleridge. He was a person who stressed on imagination, which claimed to be of two types: primary and secondary. His principal work includes poems on various subjects in the year 1786, Ode to France, Fears in Solitude, Frost at Midnight in the year 1798, and of course, Preface to Lyrical Ballads and Rime of the Ancient Mariner in the year 1798. 1802, in the year 1802, Dejection Ode, famously called as Dejection Ode. In the year 1816, he made his important works like Constable, Kubla Khan, Lime Tree by Prison. In 1817, his foremost phenomenal work, Biographia Literaria, which claimed to be his best critical work. Also, there is a note of the 8 poems composed by Coleridge between 1795 and 1807 is called Conversation Poems. On the composition of lyrical ballads. Why it is very important, lyrical ballads? Why? Because it stressed on the common language of man, the subject being the common man, as well as it focused on the common subject, the rustic life, the common day-to-day life of man. That's the reason why it was a greatest success. S.T. Coleridge was a person who always believed supernatural elements, and he made use, vividly used in many of his poems. So this is what S.T. Coleridge commented through his Biographia Literaria. From the preface to lyrical ballads, he made vivid description about the common subject of man, the common life of a common man, and the language which can be understood by everyone. Before the publication of lyrical ballads, it was not meant for the people, common people, to read literature, to enjoy literature, to criticize literature. But with the publication of lyrical ballads, all people in every corner and nook and corner of England started to read literature, started to praise poetry, started to criticize poetry, started to discuss poetry. This is what the great impact made by William Wordsworth and Coleridge. How this slide clearly shows how Coleridge objects to Wordsworth's arguments about the language of poetry. According to Wordsworth, language should be plain, language should be simple, language should be lucid so that a common man can easily understand. But Coleridge was opposed to that idea of Wordsworth's theory of poetry. Who is a poet and how a poet should be? What is a poet or whom is a poet? According to the great romantics, poet is a man speaking to men. So he has a moral responsibility of educating the public, educating the mass. We will move to the second generation poets. In the first generation poets, we saw how William Blake, S.T. Coleridge, and William Wordsworth supported, contributed, made impact, influenced the arena of poetry. Now we will see the second generation poets, junior romantics. Lord Byron, he was called as the replica of William Shakespeare, who would have excelled Shakespeare if he had given, if he had time to surpass William Shakespeare. His principal works include Hours of Idleness, English Bards, Childs Herald's Pilgrimage, which is a famous work which has been prescribed in most of the education institutions. The Corsair Lara, Manfred, Beppo, Don Juan, another important work of Byron, Don Juan, and of course The Vision of Judgment. P.B. Shelley, one of the second generation romantics, who influenced people, critics, writers, publishers through his wonderful style of poetry making. Of course, Queen Mab, The Revolt of Islam, Prometheus Unbound. He is very famous for his odes. He had written odes such as West Wind, Skylar, Grecian Urn, Adonis, A Defense of Poetry, The Mask of Shelley's idea of poetry. P.B. Shelley's idea of poetry, how he defended poetry, in what ways a poetry can be acclaimed, appreciated and accepted and recognized. He also quotes Sidney's Apology for Poetry. Among the Romans, a poet was called Waits, which is seen as a diviner, foreseer and a prophet. How a poet should be viewed. John Keats, in the year 1816, he had published on first looking into Chapman's Homer, and then his famous Endymion, Hyperion, La Belle Dame Sans Mercy, 5 great odes: Ode to Psyche, Ode to Nightingale, Ode on a Grecian Urn, Ode on Melancholy, and Ode to Adam. The impact of French Revolution upon Romanticism. We could see the American Declaration of Independence as well as the Declaration of Rights of Man and the Citizen. These are all very important as well as two historic documents. Revolution and Napoleon period in France. French Revolution began with the storming of the Bastille on July 14. In the year 1792, September massacres. 1793, King Louis XIV and Queen Mary Antoinette executed. England joins alliance against France. 1804, Napoleon crowned as an emperor. And 1815, Napoleon defeated at the famous battle at Waterloo. Impact of the French Revolution. How French Revolution had a great impact upon England, and it was very evident in literature too. Wordsworth visited France twice during this revolutionary period. He recalls the excitement that he felt during the period in his autobiographical poem, The Prelude. How the Romantics reacted to French Revolution. Robert Southey, in his comment, said, "Old things seemed passing away, and nothing was dreamt of but the regeneration of the human race." Wordsworth, in its prelude, made, "Europe was rejoiced, France standing on the top of golden hearts, and human nature seeming born again. Bliss was it in the dawn to be alive, but to be young was very heaven." We could see how the writers commented the French Revolution and how did they welcome it. Of course, French Revolution had a very great impact upon writers, culture, society, law, economics, trade, and how it impacted in England. These are all the radical thinkers of the Romantic era. Thomas Paine, of course, through his Common Sense, Rights of Man, and The Age of Reason. A prolific, acclaimed, accepted, recognized woman writer, Mary Wollstonecraft, through her works Vindication of the Rights of Men and Vindication of the Rights of Women. William Godwin, an inquiry concerning political justice. Again, how French Revolution influenced authors and other part of people most in England. These are all the ways in which French Revolution, Battle at Waterloo, defeat of Napoleon, England, which is so close to France, had a great very impact because of French Revolution. Not only politically England and France had relations, but literary relations were also there. That's what, through the author's views and comments, it is very evident